Opening paragraph. The sun was setting low in the sky, casting long shadows over the dusty streets of Goshen as the Apple Turnover gang hatched their most daring plan yet. 12 desperados, each with their own peculiar set of skills, had banded together under the cunning leadership of the infamous Krusty McIntyre. Krusty was a man with a sharp mind and an even sharper tongue, known for his strategic acumen and his penchant for apple turnovers, a delicacy which had earned the gang its peculiar name. The town of Goshen had suffered under their tyranny for too long, and it was high time for the sheriff to bring order to the chaos they wrought. The 5th episode of the Apple Turnover gang's escapades began with the clandestine planning of Trixie, the mayor's daughter's, kidnapping. Krusty had gathered his band of misfits in the dimly lit backroom of the Sweetwater Saloon, a place where the whispers of their nefarious deeds had become as common as the clinking of glasses and the smell of stale tobacco. The gang members included Sugar Simmons, the charming gunslinger with a smile as sweet as a fresh apple pie, Spicy Sally, the explosives expert with a fiery temper to match her red hair, Dowie Dave, the burly safecracker who could make any lock tremble with fear, Cinnamon Charlie, the nimble-fingered pickpocket who could swipe your watch without you knowing the time had changed, Glaze Gus, the getaway driver with a penchant for the dramatic, Flaky Fred, the group's scout, who had a knack for disappearing like a wisp of steam from a freshly baked turnover, Golden Grace, the sharpshooting beauty who could hit a fly on the wall from 50 paces, Pastry Pete, the gang's quartermaster, who had a nose for the finest supplies, Syrupy Soup, the smooth-talking distraction artist, Juicy Jasper, the strongman with the heart of an overripe apple, Crumble Carla, the locksmith who could open any door without making a sound, Fruitful Frank, the gang's lookout, who had eyes in the back of his head, and Buttery Bill, the gang's youngest member, who served as their resident horse thief and all-around errand boy. The plan was simple. Sugar would charm Trixie into a carriage, Spicy would create a diversion with a series of well-placed explosions, Dowie would secure the carriage's locks, and Glaze would whisk them away to the OK Ranch, the gang's secret hideout nestled in the rugged Badlands. However, the universe had a peculiar sense of humor, and it decided to play a trick on the Apple Turnover gang that day. As Trixie stepped into the carriage, she tripped on her own voluminous skirts, knocking over a barrel of water that had been conveniently placed by the saloon owner, Mr. Jenkins, who had tipped off the sheriff about the impending crime. The resulting commotion alerted Sheriff Clayton and his posse, and the chase was on. The gang's escape was as chaotic as a kitchen during a surprise bake-off. Flaky Fred's horse threw a shoe, forcing him to run alongside the carriage, panting like a dog in a heat wave. Syrupy Sue's diversion was foiled when a rogue chicken pecked at the dynamite fuse, causing the explosion to go off prematurely and knocking out a tooth in the process. Meanwhile, the sheriff and his men were hot on their trail, their hooves echoing like thunder across the prairie. As the sun disappeared below the horizon, the Apple Turnover gang reached the OK Ranch, a sprawling spread that was as welcoming as a mouthful of sourdough. Krusty knew they had to act fast to secure their prize, so he sent Crumble and Buttery to scout the perimeter while the rest of the gang barricaded themselves inside. The sheriff's arrival was met with a hailstorm of bullets, and a fierce shootout ensued. It was a battle of wits and guts, with the gang's superior numbers and firepower pitted against the lawmen's superior training and determination. But as the night grew darker, so did the gang's chances of escape. The first to be captured was Flaky Fred, who had the misfortune of stumbling into a patch of cacti while trying to evade the posse. His howls of pain alerted the sheriff to his whereabouts, and he was quickly hogtied and thrown into the back of the jail wagon. Next was Crumble Carla, whose stealth was no match for the sheriff's trusty bloodhound. Biscuit, who sniffed her out hiding in the chicken coop. She went down without a fight, clutching her bruised ego like a squashed turnover. Sugar Simmons tried to sweet-talk his way out of a tight spot, but the sheriff had had enough of his apple-polishing ways. A swift punch to the gut and a pair of handcuffs later, he was on his way to the jailhouse too. Spicy Sally put up more of a fight, setting off a few fireworks in a desperate bid for freedom, but she was no match for Golden Grace's marksmanship. One well-aimed shot to her dynamite belt had her throwing her hands up in surrender faster than a poker player with a bad hand. Dowie Dave had the bright idea of using a pie as a makeshift shield, but the sheriff's men were too hungry to fall for that old trick. They tackled him like a pack of hungry wolves on a Thanksgiving Day parade, and he was dragged away, pie and all. Buttery to flee on a stolen horse, but he hadn't counted on Fruitful Frank's unrivaled lasso skills. The young outlaw was snatched from the saddle and dumped unceremoniously into the dirt. Glaze Gus attempted to make a break for it in the getaway carriage, but a well-placed shot from Sheriff Clayton's rifle sent one of the wheels flying, and the carriage careened into a ditch. He was pulled out, still clutching the reins, his dreams of a grand escape shattered like a dropped sugar jar. Pastry Pete was found hiding in the kitchen, surrounded by the spoils of their ill-gotten raids. His protests of innocence were as convincing as a pie crust made with cardboard, and he was hauled away with a mouthful of stolen sweet rolls. Juicy Jasper had climbed a tree to escape the chaos below, only to find himself trapped like a cat in a pickle barrel. He descended with a thud, his dignity bruised more than his body. Cinnamon Charlie was the cleverest of the bunch, slipping away into the night like a ghost. But even ghosts leave trails, and it wasn't long before the sheriff's posse had him cornered in the barn. The remaining members of the Apple Turnover gang were rounded up with varying degrees of resistance, each meeting their fate with a mix of anger, resignation, and in some cases, relief. They were thrown into the Goshen jail, one by one, the clank of the cell doors echoing through the night like the final notes of a sad folk song. And so, the 5th and 6th episodes of the Apple Turnover Gang's saga came to a close. The town of Goshen breathed a collective sigh of relief, knowing that their beloved Trixie was safe and that justice had been served. The gang members sat in their cells, contemplating their crumbling empire, as the sweet scent of victory wafted through the air on the wings of apple turnovers, baked by the grateful townsfolk in celebration of their newfound peace. The story of the Apple Turnover Gang's downfall would become a legend, passed down through generations, a cautionary tale of greed and the folly of underestimating the goodness of the human spirit. And in the quiet of the night, as the stars twinkled in the sky, Trixie would sometimes look out of her window and wonder what had become of those 12 peculiar individuals who had tried to change her destiny. But that, my friends, is a story for another time. Alright, you yolk-brained buffoons, listen up. Bellowed Big Larry, the burly leader of the Apple Turnover Gang, his face as red as a ripe tomato. Today's the day we snatch that sheriff's daughter, Susie. She's the key to our big break, a golden ticket to getting out of this dust bowl for good. The gang of 12, each with a name and role as peculiar as their leader's temperament, gathered around a dusty table in the dimly lit hideout, their eyes gleaming with a mix of excitement and greed. There was Little Joe, the nimble pickpocket, Sweet Tooth Sally, the charming distraction, Doc McNabb, the quack doctor with a penchant for explosives, and the twins, Snap and Crackle, known for their synchronized knife throwing. The list went on: Butterfingers Bobby, the clumsy locksmith, Whistling Willie, the sharp-eyed lookout, Cider Annie, the horse wrangler, Dusty Dave, the silent tracker, Apple Betty, the cunning strategist, Cinnamon Charlie, the telegraph operator, Plum Penny, the forger, and finally, Flaky Fred, the master of disguises. The plan was as simple as a pie without a top crust: kidnap Susie during her daily stroll to the general store, demand a hefty ransom, and ride off into the sunset with their pockets full of gold. But as with any plan hatched by the apple turnover gang, it was bound to go sideways faster than a greased pig at a county fair. As Susie skipped down Main Street, her golden curls bouncing in the sunlight, Little Joe and Sweet Tooth Sally approached with a wagon filled with fresh apple turnovers. "Care for a free sample, Miss Susie?" Sally cooed, flashing a smile as sweet as the sugary treats. Susie, never one to turn down a tasty snack, eagerly took a bite and found herself in a cloud of chloroform. Before she knew it, she was being whisked away to the OK Ranch, the gang's hideout on the outskirts of Goldie. But the sheriff of Goldie wasn't about to let his little girl go without a fight. He rallied his posse of townsfolk, each one more determined than the last to save sweet Susie from the clutches of the apple turnover gang. The town buzzed with anticipation as they mounted their horses and rode towards the ranch, their hearts as heavy as the colts on their hips. The shootout at the OK Ranch was the stuff of legends. Bullets zipped through the air like angry hornets, and the smell of gunpowder mingled with the sweet aroma of apple turnovers. But the gang hadn't anticipated the sheriff's cunning or the loyalty of his townsfolk. Big Larry was the first to fall, his apple-red cheeks meeting the dirt as the sheriff's bullet found its mark. One by one, the gang members were picked off. Snap and Crackle tried to make a break for it on horseback, only to be tripped by Butterfingers Bobby's clumsy attempt to cut the fence. Whistling Willie was caught with his pants down, quite literally, by a surprise attack from the posse. And as for Doc McNabb, his medical skills couldn't save him when his own explosive device backfired, sending him sky-high in a cloud of dust and shrapnel. The sheriff had a special plan for each member of the gang. Sweet Tooth Sally was lured with a promise of freshly baked cookies, only to find herself in the arms of the law. Dusty Dave was outfoxed by a cleverly placed dust devil that obscured his vision, leading him straight into a waiting lasso. Apple Betty's strategic mind was no match for the sheriff's own tactics, as he anticipated every move she made. Cinnamon Charlie, the telegraph operator, was nabbed when the sheriff intercepted his message for reinforcements and sent back a reply in code, leading him into a trap. Plum Penny's arrest was almost poetic as she was caught trying to forge her way out of town with a fake death. Ed to the ranch. Flaky Fred's masterful disguise was his downfall when he tried to blend in with the barnyard animals, only to be spotted by a suspicious rooster that alerted the sheriff. And Cider Annie, who had tried to escape by swimming in the nearby river, was caught when she forgot to account for her fear of water. Susie, bless her heart, had managed to free herself from her bonds using a pin she'd hidden in her hair. She emerged from the ranch, unscathed and as feisty as ever, to the cheers of the townsfolk. The apple turnover gang, once feared across South Dakota, were now nothing more than 12 sorry souls in handcuffs. The town of Goldie breathed a collective sigh of relief as the criminals were marched through the streets and thrown into the clink, one after the other. The sound of the jail cell doors slamming shut echoed through the town, a sweet melody of justice served. And so, the legend of the apple turnover gang's sixth and final escapade became a cautionary tale, whispered around campfires and told to wide-eyed children as a reminder that no matter how much sugar you coat a criminal with, they're bound to get caught in the end.